Okay, we're going to finish up Chapter 14 now in these little videos. This is where we last left off. And again, what the PowerPoint was doing was breaking the chapter of what is the federal and estate tax, a combined tax. They're breaking it down between the gift and the estate tax. So right now we're concentrating on the tax at death. And it's talking about how you determine what is included in a person's estate, what gets included. What to include, because you may have assets titled in ways it's not quite clear who owned it. For example, and we can skip community property because Maryland is not a community property state, so let's skip that for the moment. Suppose you live in Maryland and you have and you're married and you have an account with your spouse. It's a joint account, and the bank account titles it as being jointly held. You own it together, and whoever survives can get to the money immediately. So the gift is at death immediately because of that right of survivorship. This is the agreement with the bank when you set it up. And the way the tax law looks at it is half the amount is included in the estate of the one who died. Half the fair market value of the account goes to the estate of the one who died. The other half, of course, is to the one who living. And it doesn't matter where the money came from. That's the point. However it's been titled, because they're married and they can make gifts back and forth to each other all day long without including any, without it being included in gift tax. So for the first to die of the husband and wife, half is included in their estate regardless of where the money came from. That's just the convention. That's the tax law for married, which is not like when the joint account is for unmarried couples. Here, in this case, it's based on it's going to be based on the percentage of the contribution. Where did it come from? Who started the account? So again, this is with unmarried individuals, and it's going to be based on tracing where the money came from, tracing the dollars to whom it belonged to originally. A special title of accounts called tenancy in common, which is different than joint tenancy. And wow, I forgot what the difference is, but I believe the main difference is that there's no right to survivorship. No right to survivorship. That could be one. Let's say no. I don't think that's the case. I think the difference of tenancy in common is that it is assets which creditors can get to their share. Meaning, if you own 40% in tenancy in common, which is abbreviated as TIC, tenancy in common, if you own 40%, and you owe somebody money, they can take over your 40%. So your creditor could come in. Let's draw a creditor. This is what they look like. And they're usually angry. So they could take your 40%. Unlike joint tenancy, in joint tenancy, the creditors can lien against you. They can do a lien, L-I-E-N, but they cannot walk in and just own your percentage share. So I think that's the main difference between joint tenancy and tenancy in common. Nevertheless, you can see what happens, how it gets included in the estate at death. It's based on where it came from. Same idea. Percentage interest actually is what they say, which will represent where it came from. Okay. This is just, this is what you already know, somewhat, maybe a little bit more detail than I'm going to require you, but for purposes of Uh, the important part is this: you expect it to know that marital and charitable deductions are not included in either the gift or the estate tax. When you do the calculation for the estate tax, certain expenses can be reducing the estate. I think the not most important, because it's not a large dollar amount, but the one to not forget about is there's only one time that burial expenses, or there's only one place where burial expenses can be deducted. They're not allowed to, they do not get deducted against income tax. So burial expenses, income tax is not a deduction. So let's say income tax, and say no. But for the estate tax, at death, burial expenses can reduce the estate, so we'll say here, yes, it is a deduction. That's sort of a trivial question, but important for CPAs to know. All right, let's see, the unified credit we did, surviving spouse we did. This is the same thing, only it's now being applied to the estate tax. Let's take a look at this example. It's not really new information, but just for purposes of making sure we've got the right idea. Ed dies. He's got $10 million. During his lifetime, he made a $1 million gift while he was alive. So it was an inter vivos gift. I'm beginning to like that word. It's Latin for meaning lifetime, within one's life. So his estate at the end of his life, during his lifetime, the $1 million gift was part of the lifetime exclusion, but now he dies in 2014, where the exclusion, we're going to find out, that year was 5.3. So his total estate, or his total lifetime gift and estate gifts, was $1 million, that's here, plus $10 million here, $11 million. And they tell you that here, minus the lifetime exclusion applied at the 40% rate, and you wind up getting the same thing the formula gets. Again, I think that this is the easier way to conceptualize how it works because it is a unified tax. All right, we'll not stop here, but we'll finish up by saying that it is kind of interesting that they even mention it, but it's not a bad idea. One of the ways the law helps you pass assets to the next generation and bypass a whole generation is through what's called a generation skipping tax. In a way, the law is not trying to help you, but because they have an exemption under the generation skipping concept, it gives you an ability to make the transfer. Let's just see what this is all about. Suppose this is you, and here's your child, and your child has children, which will be called grandchildren. That's cool. That's the way life goes. And you've got money up here, and you got a lot. And it's going to be subject to estate tax. And you know that if you pass it here, it'll be subject to an estate tax here. In other words, the estate tax is on the transfer. It's on the transfer from here to here, whether it's lifetime or at death. So that's one. And when this child dies and transfers it to the grandchildren, it'll be subject to another transfer tax because it's transferring again. That's two. So a clever individual will say, I got an idea. I'm going to do the following. I'm going to make my gift, or some of it, maybe $1 of it, I'll skip and put it just directly to the grandchildren. That means it will only be subject to one transfer and save at least a second bite at the apple that the state tax would have, if we did it in 2 steps, meaning here and here. Great idea. Take some money and skip a generation. So the tax law allows you to do that for at least $1 million. After that, this generation skipping, GS, generation skipping, is subject to a generation skipping tax for amounts that go beyond $1 million. And that's how the tax law avoids people taking advantage of skipping generations with their gifts. Above $1 million is subject to a generation skipping tax, and what it basically does is it restores the tax that got missed by skipping the generation. That's what it does. All right, don't forget to step up in bases, and that is that. Okay. If you have any questions, let me know. Send me an email, and I'll address it either individually or to the whole class. Thank you very much.